On Halloween night 1968, the manager of a King Street Kentucky Fried Chicken store was gunned down outside his home in Sherbrooke, Quebec. Rolland Giguere's death was the only murder recorded in Sherbrooke in 1968, and it's the oldest unsolved murder on record in the city. This is one of those great mysteries of the last century we were just talking about. Another one of Sherbrooke's indecipherable enigmas that when you scratch the surface, you find the mystery is quite penetrable, provided you have the will and the guts to really take a hard look at what's going on in small town Quebec. This is Who Killed Teresa. I really like this story because it's very region and place specific. We're talking about a 54-year-old cold case, but it's got elements that anyone can relate to. I was talking about this with a colleague at work who gets the Substack newsletter. We worked a couple of years ago on a project. Some of you may have seen it. We took StatsCam murder data and we visualized it using Tableau. That's JJ. Anyway, he gets the newsletter and he was telling me that he really liked it, and he liked it because he's this guy from Buffalo, right? And he knows nothing about Quebec, let alone Sherbrooke, Quebec. But he was just saying, I really like it. He was like, that biker priest story, what the fuck, man? And yeah, it's exactly what the fuck is right. So this is a story of three guys who tried to build a chicken empire like St. Hubert barbecue in the townships, but they wound up grounded. And for a great read on St. Hubert, we've talked about it again. The episode Ring, 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 The Murder of Michel Perron is a great reference point. There's a lot of links here today, and a lot of great visual stuff, particularly involving Kentucky Fried Chicken and the Colonel. We'll get to that. If you go to the website, teresallore.com, TheresaAllore.com. You can find it all. So this started, this chicken empire started in the 50s when Lennoxville native Douglas Patrick opened a canteen on Speed Street near the Georgian Hotel. Georgian Hotel is where Louise Cameron, her boyfriend Daniel Braun, used to meet for a beer. So there's all this interconnectivity coming together now. Business was good, and in April 1963, Patrick expanded and he moved the canteen to Queen Street and called it Pat's Kentucky Fried Chicken, or some called it Pat's Barbecue. And he became one of Colonel Sanders' first franchises in the province of Quebec. Business continued to be good, so Patrick took on partners. Yvon Charlie Charland became vice president, and Rolland Giguere was now director of the firm. And I know that's already like too many names, but it's easy and I'll help you. Charland is the French guy. He kind of looks like Sinatra, in that toothpick thin era of his. There's that Bugs Bunny cartoon. I think it's called Stage Door Canteen or something, where Bogart wants a ham sandwich for Lauren Bacall or something. And there's all the Hollywood greats are in that, the Marx Brothers and all that. And Sinatra's in it for a moment. He sips a straw with his milkshake, and he winds up inside the straw. That's Charlie Charlin, all right? And the other two guys, they look like those chunky session musicians who backed up Elvis. So just think of them as Chicken Pat. Chicken Pat's sort of the guy with the brainchild for that. And then he takes on partners Chicken Charles and Chicken Raleigh. In November 1963, they open what will become their flagship chicken operation, Pat's KFC, at 849 King Street West in downtown Sherbrooke. They open a third chicken shack in Granby, Quebec. And finally, in 1965, they acquire a fine dining establishment across the street from Pat's KFC in downtown Sherbrooke called the Biftech. The boys take out a half-page advertisement in local papers, and we're told that the new company was registering fascinating gains. There's a financial term for you. Can we get the quarterly report? Sure, we've got fascinating gains. So these three guys, they had like big dreams, and this is a quote from one of the articles. Sherbrooke's dignified dining rooms, like the Biftech, have earned worldwide renown for some of our country's largest cities, like Montreal and Toronto, and centers of exquisite cuisine such as New York, Paris, and London. Certainly those who come to Sherbrooke will leave with fond memories of the Biftech once they have dined in this attractive house of tempting meals, right? And it's not like they're offering chicken cordon bleu, right? It's a charbroiled steak and fried chicken. So with Chicken Charles, the French guy running the Lennoxville location, and Chicken Raleigh managing the King Street KFC and the Biftech across the street, that left Chicken Pat, the senior guy, to do, I don't know what, sit home and just wait for the profits to roll in or something. And that didn't happen. Of course, because in 1968, Sherbrooke, no one was going to be coming to Sherbrooke to eat out. Sherbrooke was never going to be a restaurant destination. When I was a kid, whenever we passed through Sherbrooke, my parents spent like a half hour at Marie Antoinette's, and then we got the fuck out of Dodge. That was the extent of our stay, right? If you don't know Marie Antoinette's, look it up. It's for another day. Douglas Patrick was the victim of expanding too fast and of classic bad timing, because by 1968, we know the biker era in that region had begun. Within a year, the merchants of King Street, where these restaurants, his main anchors were located, they'd be complaining about the noise and disorderly conduct of clubs like the Adams and the Gitans up and down King and Wellington. No one would be fine dining at the Biftech. You couldn't get a parking place because there were choppers, right, and Triumph Bonnevilles parked up and down King. So and remember when I said Rolland Giguere was the only murder recorded in 1968? Well, that we know would change quickly. The Gitans would take care of that. On Halloween night, October 31st, 1968, Rolland Giguere was managing the takeout and delivery at Pat's Kentucky Fried Chicken at 849 King Street West. He worked late that evening. He left the restaurant well after midnight, and around 2:30 in the morning, Raleigh rolled into his driveway at 1060 Rue Genet. Almost immediately, he was confronted by 2 or 3 gunmen and shot several times in the stomach. Neighbors heard his cry for help. Giguere's wife ran from their home and found Rolland Giguere slouched behind the wheel of his car. According to reports, the motive was robbery. At first, police believed nothing was stolen. They thought that Giguere had already made the deposit of daily receipts at a local bank drop box. That appeared to be untrue, and it appeared that Giguere was shot over a struggle with the money. Neighbors gave a description of the getaway vehicle. At the time of the shooting, the QPF, or Sûreté de Quebec, denied rumors that Montreal hoodlums were trying to establish a protection racket in Sherbrooke. And my question would be, if they didn't believe that, then why had they established roadblocks all along the provincial auto route leading out of Sherbrooke and into Montreal? Rolland Giguere died about a week later at Sherbrooke's Hotel Dieu Hospital. He was 35 and left behind a grieving widow and 6 children. As I said, his was the only murder recorded in 1968, and today the oldest cold case on the books in Sherbrooke, Quebec. Giguere's business partner, Douglas Patrick, was the first to offer a reward, $500 for information leading to the arrest of the culprits. This reward increased to a little over $1,000 with contributions made by the Sherbrooke Daily Record, local radio stations, a clothing store called Au Bon Marché, Clark Taylor Fuels, the Canadian Restaurant Association, and Leon Vaillancourt Jewelers. Giguere's other business partner, Yvon Charlie Charlon, appears to have not made a contribution to the reward bursary. La Tribune newspaper noted that many residents of Sherbrooke wanted to make contributions but withheld donations for fear of retributions from the assailants, meaning they were probably local. So there's this strong implication here that everyone in town had a pretty good idea who had committed the robbery. Why kill a man over money? Police were beginning to suspect that Rolland Giguere was shot because he knew the thieves and would have been able to identify them had he survived. There were even some reports that the assailants wore Halloween masks to disguise their appearance, but then again, why wear a mask unless you could be recognized? Would out-of-town hoodlums wear a mask? Would they care? You know, a bunch of guys from Montreal, if Raleigh Giguere saw their faces? I think not. Douglas Patrick made an impassioned plea in La Tribune. He said, quote, "To people's goodwill, in the name of justice, and Monsieur Rolland Giguere, to give the information they have in their possession." That's key. That will resonate, should resonate for the next 54 years. And he says they have, which again sounds an awful lot like everyone in town knew who did it. But the people of Sherbrooke refused to help. Captain Gabriel of the Sherbrooke Police, he echoed this sentiment, saying, "We are ready to verify any new clue that can be brought to us." but no one came forward. It always seems the case in these matters. Sherbrooke shortly rolled on into 1969 and then quickly into a new decade, and Rolland Giguere was soon forgotten. But Giguere's widow had some parting thoughts before the case went completely cold. Madame Giguere offered that her husband had not been killed by simple thieves, but by people who knew him well. She even asserted that the murderers had been protected by certain individuals to the detriment of the investigators. In 2004, investigators made another crack at solving the Giguere case. A spokesperson for the Sherbrooke Police explained, "Our investigators have learned new elements that are important enough to relaunch the investigation. They corroborated these facts with several witnesses in the region. These are new facts that we would not verify at this time. It is extremely rare for us to relaunch investigations after so many years. An unsolved investigation is never closed, blah, blah, blah. However, serious information must be communicated to us. We are not going back to the file from the beginning. The investigators are simply continuing the work begun in November 1968. So there's a number of qualifiers there, right, that quite frankly really piss me off. We're not going back. Why not? Why not go back? And this static about an investigation never being closed. But we're really never going to do anything to resolve it, except a bunch of perfunctory things. I digress. So what were the new elements? Well, police disclosed for the first time that Giguere was hit with a .22 caliber bullets. A .22 is a cheap weapon. It's usually used by low-end criminals. In addition, police even questioned, then released two people considered to be important witnesses in the matter. Then 2 years later, in February 2006, La Tribune reported that investigators met with a potential suspect in the case. In fact, police by then had two suspects. And this is again from a spokesperson from the Sherbrooke Police. A potential suspect now in his late 60s. Now in his late 60s was encountered in this case. We interrogated him and then released him. However, our investigation was able to move forward following this interrogation. So, despite my cynicism, this 2006 investigation appeared to be making progress. So police confirm a second suspect, but stated they cannot be met for the moment. So this, I would interpret that as meaning that this second suspect was either very ill or he was out of the country, possibly in the United States. Investigators even went so far as to suggest the progress would lead to an indictment for the then 38-year-old murder of Rolland Giguere. But just when the case appeared to be gaining momentum, it was shuttered. The last update on Giguere was in 2008 in a roundup of cold cases from the townships. That also mentioned the death of Manon Dubé and the Diane Couture murder from 1997. La Tribune's René Charles Quiron reported that concerning Rolland Giguere, quote, the new elements of the investigation did, however, not permit to arrest the suspect. And then Quiron annoyingly goes on to remind readers that a murder case is always active. Blah, 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 blah. We move on. Here's, kiddies, some things I never knew about Colonel Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken. His real name was Harlan David Sanders. I might have known that, but forgot it. He was born in Indiana, not Kentucky. For most of his life, he was a failed businessman. He tried several ventures that didn't work out. When he took over a Shell gas station in 1930 and started selling fried chicken as a side hustle, things really took off, and he struck gold. Harlan Sanders was apparently a huge prick. He would often humiliate franchisees. A typical rant would involve him calling out their gravy as slop. For the back end of his years, he lived on the lake shore in Mississauga, Ontario. He lived there for like 15 years in Ontario, Canada. I had no idea. He died there in 1980. And finally, and this is my personal favorite, Colonel Sanders, Harlan Sanders, once shot a competitor over a gas station turf war, over a business turf war. He shot a man. And this is from the book Colonel Sanders and the American Dream. When Sanders discovered Stewart, who was apparently his rival, once again painting over Sanders' sign, he and two Shell officials ran to catch him red-handed, heavily armed. In the resulting gunfight, the Shell manager was killed, and Sanders shot Stewart in the shoulder. KFC currently has a purposefully poorly acted reenactment of the fight that gave Sanders complete control over the gas station market in the area after his competition was sent to jail for murder. That's strange. Look, I don't want to badmouth Colonel Sanders. I mean, I have fond memories of my grandfather bringing home a bucket of chicken after work on a Saturday. There was a Scott's Chicken Villa. KFC had all kinds of weird names before it got consolidated. Scott's Chicken Villa being one of them. That's what it was called in Trenton, Ontario. And this with the rotating bucket of chicken, which I think Dave Thomas instituted that. So this KFC in Trenton was right across the street from my grandfather's lumber business, Allure Lumber. And who didn't love the 11 herbs and spices and coleslaw, Grecian bread, slop. And this is great. There's even a photo online at teresalore.com of Rolland Giguere, the Colonel Harlan Sanders, his arm draped lovingly across Giguere's shoulder like a proud papa. Harlan Sanders was notorious for crisscrossing the country, pumping up businesses, promoting them, and apparently he made the pilgrimage at some point. I believe in the early '60s to Sherbrooke to visit their KFC franchises. So that's nice, and everyone loves the Colonel's grandfatherly image, but come on. We've all seen Breaking Bad. Chicken is a dangerous business. We've not talked a lot about the other partner Yvan Charlie Charland, the one who didn't offer a reward. Not long after Giguere's murder, the business partnership with Douglas Patrick appears to have dissolved. Patrick kept control of the restaurants on King Street. Until 1980, he served as president of Lennoxville's police committee. Ain't that interesting? Well, we'll get back to that at some point. He eventually retired to Orlando, Florida. Yvan Charlie Charland, I want to be careful, don't confuse him with Yvan Charland, the murdered Brinks guard from the Rock Forest affair. Charlie Charland kept control of the Lennoxville chicken stand. This eventually evolved into Charles Restaurant at 116 Queen Street, where Pizzaville currently is today in Lennoxville. Above the restaurant, Charland had a nightclub called Chez Robert. Some affectionately called it Disco Bob's. Yvan Charland had 3 sons who were in and out of trouble all their lives. Now, it wasn't the sons who killed Rolland Giguere. They would have been too young in 1968. But what's bred in the bone will out in the flesh. If you know your Bible. Or Robertson Davies. In the 1970s, the town of Lennoxville was in a constant battle with the owners of Disco Bob's over noise complaints, drugs, and reports of drunk and disorderly behavior. Curiously, the name Yvan Charland is rarely mentioned in these complaints, though he was most certainly the owner. More on that later. Charland's son, Robert, as you might imagine, managed Chez Robert. But it was the other 2 sons, Marc and Jean Charland, that caused the most trouble. Marc Charland was the boyfriend of Carole Fecteau, the 18-year-old murdered in East Hereford in 1978, a sort of prelude to all the violence that would unfold that year. We touched briefly on Fecteau in the Manon Dubé episode. We'll talk much more about her. Jean Charland was a member of the Gitans motorcycle gang. Period. He was tried and convicted for his participation in the July 1978 Lennoxville murders of Raymond Grimard and Manon Bergeron, but later, rather miraculously, had his conviction overturned in 1981. This too we will address later. It's going to be the main focus of our destination. And here's my beef. Here's the crux of my manifesto today. It's striking that local news would update the public in 2004, 2006, and 2008 on the cold case of local businessman Rolland Giguere, the oldest cold case on their books, but never bother to ever mention that one of the victim's business partners had a son who was implicated in one of the most high-profile murders in the history of the region. A guy who eventually beat the charge, a gitan who beat the charge with the equivalent of a slap on the wrist. Maybe this had something to do with Madame Giguere's suggestion that the murderers had been protected by certain individuals to the detriment of the investigators. Small towns, they like to keep their secrets. Once again, it wasn't Yvon Charland's sons who murdered Rolland Giguere. That wasn't possible, but it is possible that there were long-standing associations with criminal elements in Sherbrooke within the Charland family. Was Rolland Giguere's murder just a crime of opportunity? Or was it something more? Was it a planned action to eliminate the competition? And if so, competition for what? Competition for fried chicken? Restaurant domination? Something more? This is who killed Teresa. You know, everybody has a nut to chew, and some of us can get quite polarized and fanatical about it. And my nut to chew is the whole 1978 murder of Raymond Grimard and Manon Bergeron, which I say we will get to. But for those reading ahead, for those who have read Wish You Were Here, it's covered in that chapter, chapter 5, The Green and the Blue. That chapter was confusing to a lot of people. Why include a large section on the Charles Marion case and then a large section on the trial of Fernand Laplante, who for the murders of Grimard and Bergeron, which apparently he did not commit. Why spend all that time on that? Look, I'll say it really simply. This is why, because when the Marion trial was taking place, it was taking place in parallel with my sister's disappearance. And that case, which I think was a useless affair because I think he faked his kidnapping, sucked up all the police resources in the area, so they couldn't be devoted to her disappearance. Point one. Point two, when her body was found 5.5 months later, that happened concurrently with the trial of Fernand Laplante for the murders of Grimard and Bergeron. And again, at the time when they should be focusing on the discovery of a body of a 19-year-old girl, all the time and energy was sucked up into this case. That's the most sympathetic view of these things, but it has nagged at me like a boil on my ass for the longest time. And the whole reason I'm doing this is I feel there was something much more nefarious going on, especially with the Grimard Bergeron murders. And that's, folks, where we're going. If you're I'll just say this, if you're a US listener and you're sick and tired of hearing about Wish You Were Here in a book you can't buy because it's a Canadian book, have no fear. The release date, the American release date for Wish You Were Here is May 3rd. So about 6 weeks from now, it will be launched here. And you can buy, I think, the paperback edition for under $20. No shipping if you're an Amazon Prime member. Not that I should be promoting Amazon Prime, but, if you buy it. Well, look, let's be honest. If you want it local, you're going to have to order it. So go to your bookshop and pre-order it, is what I would say. We're here. I'm just yakking. I do want to offer some follow-up comments from what we talked about last time, the update on the murder of Louise Camera, and my suggestion that the Sûreté du Québec should interview Raymond Roy as a person of interest. That isn't that little nugget wasn't me being fanatical to an idea and obsessed with an idea, nor was that me just shooting stray bullets. how do and I did an interview last week on local French radio, 107.7 with Martin Pelletier, where he asked me that question. He asked me sort of like, do I communicate with these cases with the police? And you gotta be careful how you answer that one. Because I was on radio, I said what you'd expect me to say. I said, well, I communicate with the police about my sister's case because that's where they have the authority to talk to me. Do conversations bleed into other cases? Sometimes. I was asked if Raymond Roy is still alive. He is. So I know that. And I know the Sûreté de Quebec needs to question this person again. And I know that the public needs to come forward with information about Raymond Roy and about the death of Rolland Giguere, even though it's 54 years later. And, penetrating, infiltrating the people who need to show some responsibility to do that. I'm not supposed. I don't think I'm speaking to those people now in this form with an English-speaking podcast. I just say that we have tools for getting the message out and engaging the people that need to come forward, and we're experimenting with those tools. So, this is high stakes things. I package it as something entertainment and Colonel Sanders and all this kind of stuff. That's to make it listenable and enjoyable on a certain level. You charm, you persuade, because the alternative is I'm just whinging at people about my squeaky wheel issue. But sometimes it can become just maybe a little too charming. What's underneath it is deadly serious, and I'm really all entertained to the destination of wanting to resolve something, but that's the intention, right? Is resolution of cold cases. That's ultimately, and that is deadly serious. That is deadly serious. But the mechanism for doing that needs to be a little less desperate, a little less frayed, and more manipulative, quite frankly. That's it. The 1968 unsolved murder of Rolland Giguere, oldest cold case on the books in Sherbrooke, Quebec. The only murder in Sherbrooke in 1968. We'll come back next time with something new. I don't know what it will be. But until then, this is Who Killed Teresa. I'm your host, John Allure. Have yourselves a great day.